scuffle, belongings, eyeball, and cold-blooded are words invented by William Shakespeare. We're going to explain these words and more in this vocabulary episode of
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Welcome. I'm Reza.
And I'm Craig.
And with over 45 years of teaching experience between us, we are going to help you improve your English and take it up to the next level. How are you, Craig?
I'm very well, my friend. How are you?
I'm fit as a fiddle. I'm doing very well indeed, I must say.
Pleased to hear it.
Now, to podcast or not to podcast, shall we proceed?
That is the question. We're all about Shakespeare in this episode, and we're going to speak about some vocabulary connected very strongly to William Shakespeare. We did speak about Old English back in episode 167. So if you want to listen and learn a bit about Old English in general, go to inglespodcast.com/167. But today we're specifically looking at vocabulary that Shakespeare is credited for because he introduced it into the English language.
Yes, so we're not talking about Old English. We're talking about English used today, but that Shakespeare invented. Well, let's clarify that. Shakespeare is rightly credited for adding many new words to English. However, he is sometimes mistakenly, that means by accident, credited for some words that he actually wasn't the first to use. So he doesn't deserve to be thanked for them. But certainly he perhaps made those words more popular. Some words may well have already been widely used in spoken English. But Shakespeare's works is where they were first recorded in writing. So that's why they become popular, perhaps. And he also created new word forms by adding prefixes and suffixes. So he changed verbs to nouns and that type of thing, like assassinate to assassination. So maybe the verb existed, assassinate, and he created the noun assassination. So he is credited with things that he actually didn't invent. Bear that in mind.
And Reza spoke about Shakespeare's works. Now, work you probably know as a verb, to work. We're working tomorrow. But you can use works as a countable noun when you're speaking about works of art. For example, the Mona Lisa is a work of art. Shakespeare's plays and sonnets are considered works of art. So Shakespeare's works, his plays and his poems and his sonnets, etc.
Craig, I tell you what, shall we give the listeners a very short list of the many possible words that come from Shakespeare?
Let's do that. Now, most regular listeners already know that I am addicted to chocolate. But did you know that addiction, the noun, comes from a play called Othello, written by William Shakespeare, to be addicted to something? Are you addicted to anything? Do you have an addiction?
I'm not as addicted to chocolate as you, but
no, not even close. Maybe biscuits.
I do miss it if I don't have it for a week. Maybe biscuits, yeah. A biscuit addiction.
Another word from a play called Macbeth is assassination.
Oh, he said Macbeth. Oh dear. We're all going to die. No, we're not going to die. Apparently, you should say the Scottish play. Have you ever heard of this superstition?
No, I didn't know that. Tell me.
Craig. No, actually, listeners, Craig and I and you don't really have to be frightened. But Shakespearean actors, people who act in theatres and do the plays of Shakespeare all the time, there's a very old tradition in Britain about not calling Macbeth Macbeth.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a superstition. That means people believe that something could happen, but there's no scientific reason.
So it's bad luck.
Yeah, it's just bad luck to say Macbeth. So actors of Shakespeare, and they like to say the Scottish play because they think if they say Macbeth, they're going to have terrible bad luck. What about that?
I didn't know that. So from the play, the Scottish...
You can say Macbeth because you're not an actor.
From the Scottish play, otherwise known as Macbeth, to assassinate someone. So assassination. Assassination is very similar to murder. What's the difference?
For me, they could be used interchangeably in some situations. For example, Lee Harvey Oswald murdered JFK, or he assassinated JFK, Kennedy. That makes sense. But assassinate's only really used in modern English when it's an important murder, would you say?
Yeah, somebody who's well known, like a politician or a famous person, is assassinated and normal people are murdered.
I think in Shakespeare's time, he probably used the word assassinate, whether it was an important person or not.
Yeah.
So although he may have invented the noun assassination, I'm not sure about the verb, but the noun, in modern English, we don't quite use all the words exactly the same. By the way, do you know the origins of the word assassin?
No.
So Shakespeare first used it in English. It's very similar in Spanish, as you know. Asesino, asesinar. It's very similar. And in French and in many other languages. It comes from Arabic. It comes from the word hashish, as in marijuana.
Oh, really?
Yeah, originally. So the original assassins were from North Africa.
And smoked hashish.
They smoked hashish before they assassinated people. And somehow, through a process of etymology, words changing, the words hashish became assassin. You can kind of hear a connection. Hashish, assas.
Mm-hmm.
The word assassin does come from the word hashish, bizarrely.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Our next word is belongings. You might know the verb to belong. Does this mobile phone belong to you? Does it belong to her? So the noun belongings, the things that belong to you. This is from a play called Measure for Measure by Shakespeare. Have you got all of your belongings, you could say.
Cold-blooded is a word we mentioned in our introduction. Cold-blooded, for example, a cold-blooded serial killer, refers to a person who does something awful, something not very nice, without any sense of passion. So it's not like they got really angry and they couldn't control themselves. No. They planned it. It was premeditated. They knew it was going to be a horrible thing before they did it, but they did it anyway. Cold-blooded murder.
Sangre fria. From another play called As You Like It, we have the word eventful, which kind of means full of notable events. For example, I could ask Reza, have you had an eventful week so far? This is Friday today. We're recording this podcast. Has your week been eventful?
Yes, largely involving having cold showers and waiting for a delivery man to deliver an electric water heater. I hope he comes today. That will be the main event of the week for me.
So if the water heater hasn't been delivered, then your week has been non-eventful.
Yes, indeed. I could say that.
Eyeball. Eye, ojo, and ball. Eyeball is a noun. And Shakespeare had this word in a play called The Tempest, which we use sometimes as a verb these days, don't we? You could say, if you're looking at someone intensely, fijamente, you're staring. To stare is mirar fijamente. If you're looking at someone offensively, perhaps, you could say, hey, why are you eyeballing me? Have you heard that?
Yes, yeah.
Don't eyeball me, man.
Yeah, like don't stare at me. Don't get your eyes up close to me, looking at me. Craig, I'm getting off the point a bit, but I can't resist. When I was a schoolboy, there was a quotation from Shakespeare which made me giggle. The giggles kind of laugh like like a silly schoolboy or schoolgirl. And it was connected to this eyeball. It was from Shakespeare as well. It was from The Merchant of Venice, I think. And basically, to cut a long story short, I'll give you the quote first, see if you can guess it. Ride high on these balls of mine. Is the quote. I can guarantee you that is a quote from Shakespeare. And as you can imagine, or not, depending on how your mind thinks, I found this very, very funny when I was a schoolboy. But of course, listeners, I know that you don't have dirty minds. You are not mal pensados. And you clearly know that Shakespeare was referring to eyeballs. Of course. Yeah. When he
not testicles, you mean?
Yeah. When the protagonist of the play, I can't remember who it was now, was talking about how much he liked looking at the beautiful woman. He said, "Oh, ride high on these balls of mine." And what he meant was, I want to look at you with my eyeballs for a long time. Well, I'm laughing now. As you can imagine, as schoolboys, we thought this was the best thing ever.
It wasn't saying to her, "You can ride on my balls anytime." No. Fashionable is from a play called Troilus and Cressida. Fashionable, a fashionable person, obviously from fashion. Would you describe yourself as a fashionable person?
No, I'm afraid I've been left behind by fashion.
Although you are wearing a very fashionable shirt today.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I do make an effort to look good in podcasts since nobody's looking.
Yeah, Reza and I have the perfect clothes, face, body for podcasting. The next word, I love the sound of this word. It's gloomy. 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 Where's that word from?
Well, gloomy, the adjective, was invented by Shakespeare, as far as we know, but he didn't invent the original verb to gloom. But the original verb isn't really used much these days.
No,
we don't often say that, oh, he's glooming or it is glooming. That's not common.
No se dice.
The word that Shakespeare invented is the adjective gloomy, and that is very common. For example, John's feeling really negative and depressed. He's feeling gloomy, negative, depressed. His outlook on life is very negative.
You can walk into a gloomy room, or you could walk into somebody's gloomy flat, or go into a gloomy bar, very depressing, very dark and negative.
And there's something about Shakespeare. It's not just my imagination. Many thousands of books have been written about this. His words, it's not by chance that he uses them. And the word gloomy, it kind of sounds like what it is. If you're a native English speaker anyway, you kind of get it, yeah. Gloomy sounds kind of like black,
gloomy.
negative, not going to be good. I don't know if all our listeners appreciate it yet, but once your level of English gets better and better, and you really get a feel for the natural sound of a language, you'll see that Shakespeare had a real talent for using words that kind of like, even the sound of them creates an atmosphere apart from the meaning. So gloomy just sounds negative and dark.
You can visualize it, can't you, as being dark and depressive, and the opposite of happy. Our next word is inaudible. Inaudible, which is...
Sorry, what did you say?
Inaudible.
I didn't quite hear that. What's that?
That because it means you can't hear it. If something's audible, you hear it. If something's inaudible, Reza, and I'm not going to shout, then you can hear it. And this is from a play called All's Well That Ends Well. Shakespeare was very big on prefixes, which means he used a lot, or invented a lot of prefixes, those short little things before the word, to make them opposite. And some examples: vulnerable, invulnerable, distinguishable, indistinguishable, comfortable, uncomfortable, which appeared in Romeo and Juliet, aware, the opposite, unaware, from Venus and Adonis, and the opposite of dress is to undress, and Shakespeare used that word in Taming of the Shrew. And finally, in the Scottish play, Macbeth, real, Shakespeare invented unreal. So he was he was a big fan of putting these prefixes at the beginning of words to change them from one meaning to the opposite.
Another word which is very important, of course, in the modern world, in daily life, is the word manager. Manager, such a very important word. Did you know that was originally in a Shakespeare play? It comes from A Midsummer Night's Dream. And I'll give you a quotation from it. "Where is our usual manager of mirth? What revels are in hand? Is there no play to ease the anguish of a torturing hour?" So the usual manager of mirth. But the meaning there doesn't really mean the same as what we think of as a manager. Your manager is your boss, right, at work. But there, a manager of mirth, someone who manages, who controls Mirth is like fun and laughing. So I guess they're talking about a clown or a funny person, right?
Yeah, exactly. Although these days we'd use manager as an office manager, for example, a person who runs an office, or a restaurant manager is the person who runs the business or runs the restaurant, who manages the place.
But being Shakespeare, as we said earlier, it just sounds good. It sounds funny. Even in the modern world, although you wouldn't normally speak like this, manager of mirth, it just kind of, it already makes you kind of want to smile. Where is our usual manager of mirth? In other words, funny person. And the fact that it has alliteration, the m and the m, repeated, manager of mirth, it kind of just makes you already want to smile and think, oh, this is going to be funny. You kind of already know that there's something funny going to happen.
And speaking of the way words sound, the next word is a word I love the sound of. I love saying this word. It's scuffle. Scuffle. It's a verb and a noun. SCUFFLE. To scuffle or a scuffle, which is riña or altercado, and it's from Antony and Cleopatra. There was a scuffle in the car park, for example. There was a scuffle in the car park after the club closed. People were fighting. It sounds really, you can imagine people fighting, scuffling, hitting each other.
Now, the word elbow has been around for a long time, el codo. Obviously, that's a body part. But Shakespeare first used it as a verb. He invented the verb to elbow someone, which is darle un codazo a alguien. That's in his play King Lear. So to elbow someone is to use your elbow to hit them. That's Shakespeare's verb.
Our next word can cause problems for Spanish speakers sometimes. It appeared in Love's Labour Lost, and it's the word critic. Critic, a person who criticizes something, and it's sometimes confused with the word review in English, which is crítica in Spanish. So be careful. Critic is the person who writes the review, who criticizes positively or negatively a book or a play or a song or some software. So any person who writes a review is a critic.
A word which I really like, which Shakespeare invented, was the adjective zany. That's Z-A-N-Y, zany. Like critic, it also comes from the play Love's Labour Lost. I'll give you an example of the word zany. He was clowning around like a zany fool. So zany means being silly, like a clown, doing crazy things, never sitting at peace, something always going wrong, something crazy happening. You're zany. And until I found this out a few days ago, I just presumed the word zany was a very modern word. There's something about it which sounds really modern, like it's been invented maybe in the 1950s. No, Shakespeare invented it. So sometimes it's surprising how words which sound incredibly modern actually turn out to come from Shakespeare, like zany.
When was the last time you did something zany? Been a while, eh?
Yeah, it's been a while. Obviously, zany is not a good word to describe me. Perhaps boring might be a better adjective.
Singing in the shower, that's quite zany.
Yes, I did that this morning, probably because the shower was cold because I haven't got my electric heater yet.
I have a feeling that if this heater doesn't arrive quickly, there's going to be a scuffle with you and the people from the shop.
There will be.
But not all of Shakespeare's new words became popular. Some words are very obscure and they sound funny. Can you give some examples, Reza, of some funny, obscure words that didn't really catch on, which means didn't really become popular?
Yes, I had fun surfing the web to get some of these. Slug-a-bed. That's slug, S-L-U-G, which is a baboso. And then hyphen, guion. A, and another hyphen, bed. So 3 words in one. Slug a bed. That's from Romeo and Juliet, and it's someone who sleeps in. To sleep in means to sleep longer than you should. So slugs are very slow creatures, aren't they? They just kind of lie around. They don't seem to move much. So a slug a bed is someone like a slug, not getting out of bed. But that word's disappeared. But the great thing is, as soon as you hear it, you can understand what it means. It may have disappeared, but it kind of makes sense.
You could say, hey, get up and make breakfast, you slug-a-bed.
Yeah, the person would understand that you're saying that they're lazy because slugs don't move. So it didn't become popular, but it was a good try in my opinion.
I like being a slug abed on Sunday mornings.
Craig, what other word might Shakespeare have used to describe a housewife?
Well, I'm really pleased you found this because I love this word, and it's such a shame that this didn't take on or catch on. It didn't become popular. Yes, it means housewife. It's kicky-wicky. K-I-C-K-Y hyphen W-I-C-K-Y. Kicky-wicky, and it's from the play All's Well That Ends Well. So a kicky-wicky is a housewife, but it isn't used in modern day English.
Yes, and probably a good thing because it doesn't sound that PC, that politically correct. So what does your partner do? Oh, am I kicky-wicky?
She's a kicky-wicky.
Just kicky-wicky at home. Oh, I think you would open a Pandora's box with that. You'd be in big trouble if you used that.
Yeah.
Craig, any idea what congree means?
Well, I didn't know until I read the definition, but it makes a lot of sense. It actually means to agree. And if you think about it, con, the prefix, means together. So if you agree with someone, you're agreeing together with them. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. But it didn't last. So Shakespeare invented it for Henry V, the play called Henry V. But it probably disappeared precisely because we already have a word in English, which is agree. So kind of con means with, all right? So agree, congree, I agree with you. Well, that's what agree already means. So I guess the English language didn't really need that because we already had agree. So that one didn't become popular.
You could say I concur, and consent means to say yes. Oh yeah, it makes so much sense. And I can agree with you. That's from Henry V, by the way. You can see a lot more of these words that Shakespeare introduced into the language or adapted into English. And there's a link in the show notes. If you go to inglespodcast.com/233, you can go see a long list of, I think, was it over 600 or 900 words that he introduced? Something like that.
Opinions differ, I think, about how many, yeah.
And now it's your turn to practice your English. Do you know any famous Spanish writers who have perhaps introduced words into the Spanish language? What do you think, Reza? Do you have any idea if Cervantes, for example, introduced any words?
He did. I couldn't give you any examples now, but I know that he did for sure.
So if you know of any, please let us know. We'd be happy to share your information in a future podcast. And your voice messages, which we prefer because we like to hear your voices, can be left on SpeakPipe. That's speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast. If you're going to use a mobile phone to record your message, you may need to download the SpeakPipe app, but it's very easy to use and it's free. Just remember you can only speak for a maximum of 90 seconds because we have the free version. You can send us an email with a comment or question to reza@belfastreza@gmail.com
or to craig@inglespodcast.com.
And as usual, we'd like to thank our wonderful patrons who continue supporting us and the transcriptions that we offer to you. And you can see the names of all our patrons on the website at inglespodcast.com. Reza, we should thank Bruno, our gold sponsor, who generously helps us with our Patreon program.
Yes, thanks, Bruno. Bruno, as you may know, offers walking tours of Copenhagen in Denmark through his company, CopenhagenWalkingTour.com. So you can visit castles and walk around the city, and you can listen in English or Spanish. He also organizes favela walking tours in Rio de Janeiro, and it's led by local guides, so it's safe, they know what they're doing. And part of the money from it helps the community to improve their daily life. If you want to find out more about that one, go to favelawalkingtour.com.br. So thanks to Bruno for being our gold sponsor.
And if you'd like to support the show and join our Patreon program for a minimum of $1 per month, you get instant access to recent transcriptions that have been transcribed lovingly by Angelica from Madrid. And you can do that by going to patreon.com/ Ingles podcast. Reza, let's welcome our new sponsors who have joined us this month. Who are they?
Yes, our new Patreon sponsors are Jorge Torres, Josue or Josue, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, forgive me, Josue or Josue Molina Mendez, Miguel Salazar, Edith Clavijo Moreno, and Jose Manuel Pelayo in Bernal. So welcome to the Patreon scheme to all of you.
And thank you. On next week's podcast, we're going to look at the difference between even though and even if. And that's from a listener question. So until next week, have a wonderful week. It's goodbye from me.
And bye-bye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.